So now we move into the Closing with Impact session, and this is made up of two parts, with a short talk by Helen Warburton about BioHeritage's science impact, then a panel discussion with the International Science Advisory Panel led by Duane Peltzer, and then a short talk by UC's Science Dean, Sarah Young, about the value and future of mission-led science. And then the pre-afternoon tea session, just letting you know it's a short afternoon tea. We'll then conclude with a wrap-up by Studio C of illustrations capturing the last 2 days, and we know how good they are. So, our first speaker, keep the energy up as we go through. Please welcome for this theme topic. It is about BioHeritage's impact, science impact, introduced by Duane, then impact on the PO highlights as well. Please welcome, I believe, Helen Warburton from the University of Canterbury. Almost.
Sorry, Stacey, not Helen, by the way. Helen's next, but I'll introduce her. Kia ora tautau, so called Duane Peltzer, Tako Ingoa, so Chief Scientist in the Challenge, home base, Manaki Whenua. And why have I got this up on the screen? Who's heard of wilding pines or conifers? Hands up. Thank goodness most. Now, this is one of my day job novelties, and we're going to take a step back. We've talked about impacts and projects. What we actually want to do is just take a step back and look at the challenge as a whole and some of the international context. So this is a picture. Which one of these do you think is New Zealand? Only one of those 9 images is New Zealand. And so what we have is lodgepole pine. This is the middle, the D, is actually Craigieburn Forest Park. Some of you may have seen it. It looks a little browner these days as a result of management. Why I put this up is I did my PhD in Western Canada, where lodgepole pine up here is a tonga. It's a rare species. It's the TP lodgepoles. It is a rare restoration problem that we should probably export some from D back to Canada. You know, it's invasive in other countries. And so actually there's a lot to be gained by taking an international perspective on home versus away, north versus south hemisphere, sharing knowledge and data. And just because I'm a plant geek, there's some really cool stuff that comes up, like, hey, they use the same fungi to invade here, Chile, Argentina, in Australia. Deer, pigs, possums facilitate that invasion. And so what you've actually got is this assembly of different species interacting in a different way where they've been introduced than where they came from. So it's just a way of saying, hey, international perspectives bring a lot of value. And the big green button, I got it. Very happy. This is meant to be a tidy picture of what science collaboration looks like globally from 2015. It's a bit of a horrendogram, but what you've got is the big black bars or arrows are kind of a flow of collaborations across science. It's over 36,000 studies or something ridiculous. What would happen if you went back 10 years, you would see that it's really a North American, European, east to west collaborative network. Over that 10 years, we have the rise of the Far East. This is the machinery in China and Japan and other places. And Southern Hemisphere sort of ticks along. One of the things I didn't notice when I put this up is, hang on, where's the connection between Australia and New Zealand? It's not quite as strong as I would have predicted, but there you go. Maybe that will change. So what I want to do is, Helen, I'll hand it over to her to talk a little bit about impact, what that looks like from the challenge as a whole, and then we'll introduce our international panel after that. Thanks.
Kia ora, thank you, Duane. So yesterday I was a freshwater ecologist, and I guess today I am still a freshwater ecologist, but I'm going to be talking about something quite different. So working alongside the amazing Aisling Rain as a co-lead and the rest of this incredible team, we've been trying to understand, using a diverse data-driven approach, what doing science differently looks like. So we've been collating and analysing data from your annual and quarterly reports, analysing themes from semi-structured interviews with people currently working within BioHeritage, with the goal of describing a mission-led science ecosystem and people's experiences of having worked in it. And at this point, I have a few really big thank yous to do. Firstly, thank you to all of you who have filled out your quarterly and annual reports. I know it is a bit of a drag, but the information from that has been incredibly useful. And along those lines, also, massive thank you to Andrea Erie and our support team for collating and collecting all of this information and sharing it with us. And lastly, a big thank you to Zoe Hamilton, who is sitting in the audience here, who worked as a research assistant for me last year. If you think filling out reporting is painful, imagine spending months of your life reading and rereading those reports to pull information out for us to analyse. So a big thank you. This couldn't happen without you. And lastly, thank you to those of you who engaged with Kerry-Ann and Aisling in interviews. The insights from those have been invaluable. And on that note, and apologies, this is like a blast through, quick fire literally, of some of the incredible, interesting stories that are coming out of that, and I really cannot do justice to all of it here today. I also feel this has just been an incredible couple of days, and so putting some things up here in black and white numbers feels really inadequate to capture the emotion that I feel when I think about the challenge. I have never felt so emotional at a conference. Maybe I need some more sleep. But along those lines, I do need more sleep. I have 3-year-old twin boys. It's a thing. But along those lines, a really big thank you to the wider challenge whānau. It's been an incredible family to grow up in as a researcher. So massive thanks to that. So what I am going to talk about today is some very brief research findings that firstly describe a little bit about what we look like as a challenge, a little bit about what we've done, and really a tiny bit of little impact, and then we'll leave it there. But for anyone that wants to talk to us more, you're welcome to come and talk to any of the team, and there's also one of those things down the back, those research summaries. And this is absolutely a work in progress in collaborating with the International Science Advisory Panel, and hopefully, you know, papers, publications, and stories coming out from this as we go. So what do we look like? It should come as no surprise after having heard the talks over the last few days that we are made up of diverse teams and a broad network. So each one of these slightly bigger black dots on the screen represents one of the 8 strategic outcome research teams. And those teams are made up of collectively 178 individuals from 48 organisations across those 8 research teams. Of those, 30% identify as Māori and 40% as early career. And if I just pop on another hat as the co-lead of Ngā Pikariri, or the early career PO, in this challenge, it's been wonderful to hear over the last couple of days early career mentioned so much. And I know the audience is full of early career members, and Simon and I had the absolute pleasure of sharing breakfast with nearly 35 of you this morning. So if we take a look at the rest of this insane-looking network, research teams, so those 8 research teams reported connecting with individuals from 251 external parties. So each one of these little black dots is a different, unique organisation or entity or group. And to me, this looks incredible, but it's an absolute underestimation of the challenge as a whole. So that's partly because reporting data is a little patchy. Secondly, because this is data up to the end of June 2023, so it doesn't capture all those connections that have happened in the last year. And also because this is those core strategic outcome groups and it doesn't capture all the wider work that's happening in the challenge as well, but still incredible. And the last thing that I want to point out on this network is that there are blue and black lines on it. So the blue lines are lines that are connections that have been formed through publications, which is our traditional way of measuring kind of collaboration. I'm sure that the graph that Duane showed last was through publications. But it really does not capture the diversity of connections within our science ecosystem, so we can do better. If we think about what we've produced, or if we look at what we've produced as a challenge, so those 8 dots, those 8 research teams on the last graph, as of June 30 or the end of June last year, have produced over 300 outputs, and these outputs are really diverse, and we've heard about tons of them today. Of those, 13% only were research publications, and this is not that we are underdoing the research publications. We are overachieving on all the other types of outputs. And there are really interesting stories in those numbers, which I'm not going to talk about today, but if anyone wants to talk to me about how publications are not everything, thank you, Kitty, for introducing that yesterday, and how we sell ourselves as researchers, then I'd be more than happy to do that. However, if we do look at publications, the last thing that I want to share, if we look at publications produced from the challenge as a whole over the last 10 years, they have been cited more frequently in policy documents. So this is information from a database called Overton. For those of you who have not met Overton, it's fairly new. It's kind of like the Web of Science or Scopus or another database that collects scientific literature. But it looks for policy citations given a specific research paper. For anyone that's an absolute data nerd like me and likes experimental design, the graph that you're seeing up here is set up like a classic before-after impact control or a BACI. So we have the citations and policy from people involved in the challenge in the 10 years prior to the challenge starting, and then during the challenge, so the before-after. And we have a control group of people who are involved in biodiversity and biosecurity research within New Zealand but are not associated with the challenge, so the control. And I guess the take-home message is go us, look at the cool pinky red part of the graph on the right of your screen. So the challenge citations are around 40% in policy documents compared to the rest, which is roughly at 20%. What I do not have time to go into today in any depth whatsoever is the why. So why are we seeing these patterns? But I'm going to briefly touch on some of them, and I really encourage you to talk to us or have a look at the research brief if you want to know more. So interviews suggested that these patterns are driven by several features, including values-based processes, and we've heard about that values quite a lot over the last couple of days, and that manifested itself in many different ways, and we can think of that maybe as the what. Then there's the who, so building intentional focus on building diverse teams, right teams, and co-leadership has been really important, and we've heard about that again over the last couple of days. And then this high trust model of working that allowed flexibility and autonomy has also been pivotal. But this is not without its challenges. And there are some really important lessons from essentially this experiment that we've been a part of and how the science system works. And so there's some really awesome lessons to take forward. And I'm not going to talk about them today. Read the brief, come and chat to me, and I'm going to hand back over to Duane, who's going to introduce our International Science Advisory Panel and pick their brains. Thank you.